South Africa might have recorded slight economic growth in the latest numbers, but in such uncertain economic environment, workers look to trade unions to perform their traditional roles in promoting their interests and protecting their employment. Masculinity is one of the big problems in this space, and in the past 3 days, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Cosatu, has been hosting the inaugural gender conference. Zingiswa Losi is the president of Cosatu, and she joins us now via Zoom. A very good morning to you, Ms. Losi. Thanks for making the time.
Good morning, Desiree, and good morning to the viewers of SABC.
Firstly, what is a gender conference? How does this relate to Cosatu's gender policy and what you hope to achieve?
This gender conference is the breakthrough of Cosatu in the 35 years or 36 years of its existence. Women will remember that women in the past, during the Mama Shinini's times, in the formation of the trade union federation Cosatu, women fought for the emancipation of women, but also for the mainstreaming of gender issues in the matters of the federation, in the policy of the federation. Understanding and appreciating that women have always been there during the struggles of the liberation of the people of South Africa and that of the working class in particular. And if you can also take it back to the importance of the gender mainstreaming in the policy of the federation, is that even the logo of the federation, if you look closely at it, you will realize that at the front there is a woman that is carrying the baby, helping to push the logo, and you would also have men also spinning it. It is because initially it was not in the conception in this way, but women then in the federation said it is not complete because it has men, but women are also part of this struggle. So for us to really have a total emancipation of women, we need women to be represented in the logo because they are part of the labor force, they are part of the economy, and therefore their struggles must also be recognized. So the importance and the significance of this gender conference, firstly, is that the gender structure now in the federation has been constitutionalized. In the last Congress of Cosatu, we have managed through the constitution to amend our constitution and make sure that the gender structure, which dominantly is representation of women in particular, as much as we appreciate that gender speaks to both male and female, but females are in the main our focus because we understand that they are having it on the double-edged sword of the sword. So we were having this inaugural conference to appreciate the challenges that the LGBTQI community are faced with, that women who are also in the sex work are confronted with, domestic workers in the main that they are confronted with, and all other parts of our society that are more marginalized.
It's curious, though, that you would brand it a gender conference. You're not worried that it gives the sense that you're shying away from offending certain people, whether within the trade union environment or government, instead of just plain out saying we're looking at women's issues?
Not at all. The reason why it is a gender conference, because we have had in the federation a gender desk. We have never had a women's desk. And our understanding, Desiree, is that men and women are co-joined in the workplace through the exploitation of the capitalist class. We are talking about ourselves as a class. We must start there. And then we understand that women are part of that class. Men are part of that class. So when we speak about the gender struggles, we understand that both of us, men and women, are co-joined in the workplace through that exploitation, but we also appreciate that within that, men and women are not equal. So when we talk about the gender struggles, to us, we are raising also levels of consciousness to men. We need men to be part of the conversation, not outside the conversation, so that when we take decisions on how we're going to emancipate women in particular in the gender struggles that we are all advancing, all of us, both men and women, are conscious of the decisions that we make. And we want men to be part of that struggle, which is led by women in that emancipation of those that are marginalized, which are women in particular. And by the way, they are in majority. So we are conscious of the message that we are sending to our members and to society at large. But also we must say that, remember, in how we're constituted, even in the trade union movement, as I've said, we've got men and women, but also we must remember that we've got LGBTQI community who do not confine themselves to gender binaries. That you are not going to say they are men, you are not going to say they are women. It is about how they define themselves. So they do not fall into gender binaries. And if you say it's a women's conference, how do you then explain to those that may not necessarily see themselves in what we see in them through our naked eye? So we are conscious of why it is a gender desk and why it is now a gender conference, because we understand that it represents both male and female, but also it focuses mainly on those that are more marginalized, on the vulnerable groups.
When you ascended to the top seat as Cosatu's first female president, this was lauded. Is this part of you trying to define your legacy in terms of your leadership, and why now?
Desiree, I am implementing with the collective the conference resolution or Congress resolutions of Cosatu. And it is important that when I have been given that responsibility by the last Congress, when we go to the next Congress, we report on the developments and the outcomes. So our focus during the term was to ensure that when we go to report to this coming Congress, we report on what we have done. And indeed, it is so humbling for me as the president of Cosatu to have led this federation to realize a long-standing resolution of this federation since its formation in 1985. It is a groundbreaking, and I am indeed humbled by the fact that during this tenure that I have been given, we have managed to review the gender policy of the federation. We've managed to launch the structures of the federation, and now we have managed to having an elective inaugural conference of gender. For me, as a woman leader, as the president of the federation, with my collective, to have led this federation to this far, I am indeed humbled by that.
So what important outcomes came out of these three-day engagement?
As we're having this interview now, Desiree, the conference broke to commissions yesterday. And this morning, they are busy reporting back on what is it that they would have resolved in different commissions. So we will still hear at the end what the declaration will say in terms of the outcomes of this conference. I must also say that it's going to emerge with a newly elected leadership of this structure, which was not contested at all. It was a unanimous a decision by all affiliates nominating their leadership to lead this structure as from now. Because in the past, we have always had a National Gender Coordinating Committee, which was constituted by all affiliates leadership, particularly women leaders of affiliates, to drive us to where we are today. Now we are handing over to the newly elected leadership, which will be announced towards the end of this conference today. And the chairperson of this structure will close this conference and will deliberate on the outcomes of this conference through the declaration.
Ms. Losi, you're part of the tripartite alliance. How will the outcomes of this particular engagement impact decisions by the African National Congress regarding the African National Congress Women's League, which is currently experiencing a leadership crisis in the terms of, in the sense of their president having legal issues at the courts?
We are hopeful that after this conference, the structure itself will work closely with the task team of the African National Congress Women's League, which is led by Mama Thandi Modise and her collective, to ensure that we prepare for the conference of the Women's League in particular. But also there is a national conference of the ANC in December, and Cosatu, through its national structure, after we will be going also to coming out of our own conference, we will prepare for that. And we are hopeful that whatever outcomes that we come up with will be adding value to how we intend to shape the Women's League itself, but also to ensure that women issues are forming part and are coming up onto the agenda of the ANC, but also not just women, but all the vulnerable sectors, as we call them, because the Women's League also have moved way in advance. We must also congratulate them, because they have also now have the Young Women's Desk, and they also have the LGBTQI desk within themselves, which it is very, very progressive. Now we need a functioning ANC Women's League that is going to take all these issues that we're talking about to the next level in terms of implementation and ensuring that we are no longer referring to these sectors of our economy as vulnerable, because by saying they are vulnerable, we are admitting that either society has not embraced the existence of women for what they are for in society and give ourselves the value that we deserve. They have not embraced the LGBTQI community. They have not embraced people living with disability. And we think that this structure of Cosatu and the Women's League must work hand in hand to ensure that we really put programs, Desiree, that are going to make the change that we want to see, not only through the words, but working together with civil society in advancing these struggles that we are making reference to.
Ms. Losi, Cosatu has previously called on law enforcement to act against those implicated in the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Today, the chair of the inquiry is handing over his last report to the president. Take us into the conversation taking place at Cosatu as we get reports that government is being arm wrestled into not acting against the findings of the report. Recently, we've heard of death threats against the Director General in the presidency, Ms. Baleni, just in terms of trying to get her to influence the president not to act on the findings. What conversations are taking place in Cosatu in this regard, and how are you reacting to the last report being handed over today?
Desiree, we remain with our position of saying that the Rezondo Commission report is out. Millions of rands of taxpayers have been spent on this commission. We expect that the president must act on the recommendation of this commission with no fear or favor. And we expect the law enforcement agencies of this country to also do their work. One, in ensuring that people are safe. Those that went to the commission to give evidence, they must be protected. Those that, like you make the mention of the case of Mrs. Baleni, the DG in the presidency, she has to be protected by the state apparatus of this country, the state law apparatus of this country. It cannot be that when we must fight corruption, people must die in the process. And those that are dying are those that are prepared to make this country a better country and what we are voting for. So we expect the president not to blink in this case. We don't want him to be also defocused about other issues that are taking place. The issue of, for an example, of Phala, it is an issue that the law enforcement agencies must deal with, but it must not be an issue that is going to be brought to create confusion on the Zondo Commission outcomes. We want all those things to be separated. We want the law enforcement agencies to deal with issues as they are presented. Everyone that is impacted by that Zondo Commission must appear before the courts of this country to answer for themselves. If it is allegations, you go to court just like any ordinary South African when there are allegations against you. Once you are charged, because those people must be charged first. When they are charged, they must appear before the courts of this country. They must have a right to their legal representation. They must argue their case. And what is presented in front of the judge will make the final arbiter on the matter. And then we should be able to move on, because we cannot massage, these issues, Desiree. This country is dealing with the worst economic crisis that we have ever seen. People are lavishing in poverty. High levels of unemployment are rising. High levels of inequality are rising. People have lost hope in finding employment. We are in a youth month. Youth of this country have been having discussion that we are having 75% of young people unemployed. And we have people that are going to start threatening others because they don't want to go and answer for what they have been alleged to have done. If you have done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear of. So Ms. people, when you leave, Desiree, and your direction is heading you to jail, you can't now want to spin things around and want to threaten other people and introduce bullets in their letterboxes. It cannot be allowed. We cannot have a lawless society in South Africa.
Ms. Losi, thanks for speaking to us. And just finally, I want to ask you, is there any truth to the reports that your union, Satao, may not qualify to vote in the next conference of Cosatu? How does this impact on your return as the president of Cosatu?
Desiree, I saw the headlines and I read the story and I was surprised because one, no one came to interview me, but secondly, I am not a member of Satao. That I must say. So I don't know who wrote the story and where they got that from. I am not a member of Satao. I have never changed membership. I have never joined Satao. And I will leave it at that, because I would have expected journalists, when they write stories and they hear people talking, they would come to the person that is a subject matter and that they want to make a subject. But I think I've gotten used to the fact that every time we go to Congress, my name will always rise. And for me, it is not necessarily an issue. I guess this is how, when we go to Congress, things will turn out, because it is a Congress of the Federation where all positions, I must raise this issue, all positions are vacant at Congress. We were given a mandate as the collective national office bearers, the 6 of us, to lead this federation in 2018 and to hand over this federation back to its members in 2022 in September. No one is entitled to return back, Desiree. All vacancies, 6 of them, will become vacant come Congress. Affiliates, members of this federation.
It was at the end of the process anyway, but thank you for your time, President of Cosatu, Zingiswa Losi, there talking to us about their inaugural gender conference and its outcomes and, of course, other national issues. You're watching The Agenda. A quick break. We'll be back in a moment.